Heaven and hell. Nobody knows what happens when you die. 8 billion people on Earth and not one verified answer between them. What we do have is every theory humans have produced across thousands of years of trying to figure it out. Some are comforting, some are strange, and some are going to make you rethink ones you thought you already understood. The most widespread version is simple. You die, your soul gets judged, and you go somewhere permanent. Good people up, bad people down. Eternal consequences for a roughly 80-year audition. Here's the thing, though. The version most people picture, clouds, harps, pitchforks, lakes of fire, owes more to a 14th century Italian poet than to any actual religious text. Dante's Inferno shaped the popular image of hell more than the Bible did. You've been carrying around one medieval writer's imagination as if it were theology for your entire life. Purgatory. This one exists to solve a problem. Heaven or hell works cleanly for saints and monsters. What about everyone in between? Purgatory is the Catholic answer, a transitional state where souls are purified before entering heaven. Not permanent punishment, more like a process. You're getting in, you just need to be cleaned up first. Here's where it gets interesting. The system of paying the church to pray souls through purgatory faster, called indulgences, became so financially lucrative and so obviously corrupt that it was one of the central grievances that pushed Martin Luther to write his 95 Theses in 1517. One transitional waiting room accidentally fractured Western Christianity in half. That's an outsized legacy for a theological middle ground. Resurrection. This isn't the soul drifting somewhere peaceful. This is the actual body coming back. The full you, reconstituted, returned to life in a restored world. It's central to Christianity, where the resurrection of Jesus is both the model and the promise. It's in Islam where physical resurrection precedes the Day of Judgment. It appears in Jewish texts going back to the book of Daniel. The body isn't something you escape, you get it back. The obvious problem, if your body decomposed, got cremated, or ended up scattered across a reef, what exactly comes back? Theologians have spent centuries on this. The general answer involves a transformed body, rather than the original matter reassembled. Which raises the question of what makes it you, which theologians have also spent centuries on, with less consensus than you'd hope. Reincarnation, you've lived before. You'll live again. The specific form depends on what you did last time. In Hinduism, the individual soul transmigrates from body to body across lifetimes. In Buddhism, there's no permanent self to transmigrate. What continues is more like a pattern of consciousness, a flame passing from candle to candle rather than the same flame moving intact. Same mechanism, completely different metaphysics underneath. Here's the part most people don't sit with. If reincarnation is true and karma operates as described, then your current circumstances, your wealth, your suffering, your advantages are the direct product of actions you took in a life you don't remember. The person born into poverty earned it. The person born into privilege earned that too. The theology is internally consistent. The social implications of believing it are something else entirely. Karma realms. Within the reincarnation framework, where you go next isn't random. It's determined by the accumulated weight of your intentional actions. Buddhist cosmology maps 6 possible realms: gods, demigods, humans, animals, hungry ghosts, and hell beings. Humans are considered fortunate, specifically because human existence is uncomfortable enough to motivate seeking liberation. The god realms sound better and are actually a trap. Too much comfort, zero incentive to escape the cycle. You drift through centuries of bliss and then fall back down. The hungry ghost realm is the one that should land. Beings with enormous stomachs and mouths the size of a needle. Perpetually starving, physically incapable of consuming enough to satisfy the craving. It's a cosmological diagram of addiction. Ancient Buddhist cosmology described the internal experience of compulsive wanting in a way that modern neuroscience is still catching up to. Moksha and Nirvana. Both of these are exits, not better destinations. The end of the entire system. Moksha is the Hindu version, liberation of the individual soul from the cycle of rebirth, dissolution back into the universal consciousness that underlies everything. The drop returns to the ocean. Not heaven. Cessation of the separate self entirely. Nirvana is the Buddhist version, and the Buddha mostly refused to describe it, which should tell you something. It's the extinguishing of the craving and ignorance that fuel the cycle. What remains is not personal in any conventional sense. Here's the thing. Both traditions agree this is the goal. Not a better next life, not paradise. The complete end of the process that keeps generating lives in the first place. The afterlife most people intuitively want, more existence, better circumstances, is precisely what these traditions are trying to escape. Most people's dream is what serious practitioners are running away from. Ancestor and spirit realm. This is probably the oldest framework of all, and it shows up everywhere. Before theology was written down, the dead were understood to continue in a realm adjacent to the living, present enough to influence events, important enough to maintain through ritual. West African traditions, Shinto, Chinese folk religion, indigenous frameworks across every continent. The specifics differ. The structure is identical. The dead are not gone. They are elsewhere, still connected, and the relationship requires upkeep. The living owe the dead offerings, remembrance, and proper burial. In return, ancestors provide protection and guidance. It's a reciprocal arrangement that doesn't end with death, it just changes form. What's interesting is how persistent this is even in cultures that officially hold completely different beliefs. Catholic prayers to saints operate on almost identical logic. Most people, regardless of stated theology, have the quiet intuition that their dead relatives are still around somewhere. That instinct is apparently very old and very difficult to fully argue out of someone. No afterlife. This is the materialist position. Consciousness is what the brain does. When the brain stops, it stops. There is no soul to go anywhere because there was never a soul to begin with. Epicurus made the logical case for why this shouldn't be frightening. Before you were born, you didn't exist, and that caused you no distress at all. Death returns you to that same state. The fear of death, on this view, is a mistake in reasoning. You won't be there to experience the absence. That argument is clean and almost entirely useless in practice. Being told oblivion is fine because you won't notice it does very little for the part of you that currently exists and would prefer to keep doing so. It's the correct answer to a question the emotional brain is not actually asking. The materialist position might be right. Most neuroscientists hold something close to it. It just turns out that being right and being comforting are not the same thing. Agnostic Unknown. This is the intellectually honest position, and almost nobody actually lives by it. We don't know. The evidence is insufficient. The question may be permanently beyond the kind of knowledge humans can access. That's it. No claim in either direction. The philosopher David Hume pointed out that near-death experiences, religious visions, and personal testimony don't demonstrate what people think they demonstrate. They're all produced by living brains. They could have entirely natural explanations. He wasn't closing the question. He was noting that the evidence people cite doesn't actually open it. Here's the trap. Most people who claim to be agnostic about death are not genuinely agnostic when it's personal. When it's their own mortality or someone they love, hope and fear emerge instantly. That reveals a working assumption operating underneath the stated position. True suspension of judgment is rarer than it sounds and harder than it looks. Simulation? Continuation. This one approaches the question from a completely different angle. Philosopher Nick Bostrom argued that any sufficiently advanced civilization would be capable of running enormous numbers of simulated universes. If that's true, the number of simulated realities vastly outnumbers base reality. Statistically, we are almost certainly simulated. If we are, then death is the termination of one running instance of a program. What that means depends entirely on the simulator. Instances could be saved, copied, archived, or ended permanently. Nothing about simulation theory guarantees continuation. But nothing rules it out either. The uncomfortable version is this. If you're a simulated process, whoever is running the simulation has access to everything you ever thought, felt, or did. Every moment of your life is stored somewhere in their system. Whether that's a version of heaven or the most thorough surveillance operation in history depends entirely on the nature of the entity holding the archive. Quantum consciousness. This is the most speculative scientific framing of the question. Most neuroscientists think it's wrong. It's still worth understanding. Physicist Roger Penrose and anesthesiologist Stuart Hameroff proposed that consciousness arises from quantum processes inside neurons. The theory is called orchestrated objective reduction. The relevant implication is this: quantum information cannot be destroyed. It can be dispersed, transformed, scrambled. But the information itself is conserved by the laws of physics. If consciousness is quantum in nature, then the information that constitutes your mind doesn't vanish when the brain stops. It disperses into the universe. Not a personal continuation, more like the pattern persisting without the container. Some physicists go further and argue consciousness isn't produced by biology at all. The brain focuses it, like a lens focuses light. Death ends the focusing. Not the light. That's a significant difference. It's also almost entirely unverifiable with current tools, which is exactly where these theories tend to live. Eternal recurrence. This is the one that should genuinely unsettle you. Nietzsche proposed it in the 19th century. If the universe is finite in matter and energy but infinite in time, every possible arrangement of that matter must eventually repeat, including this one, including you, this exact life, every decision and consequence and embarrassing moment and loss, recurring identically forever with no variation and no exit. You will live this again, infinitely. Every choice you made, you make again. Every regret, again. Every moment you'd rather forget again. There is no moving forward into something new. Only this, on repeat. Nietzsche used it as a diagnostic. If you truly believed you had to live your exact life over infinite times, would you want to? Would you change anything if you could? Most people find they have an immediate answer to that question. He thought the discomfort of that answer was the most useful information available. Most people prefer not to look at it directly. That's probably why this one bothers people more than the others. The others are uncertain. This one just asks you to be honest.